There is a new Dead by Daylight uninstall survey. There's actually some interesting points that they make. I'm going to talk about these points and take a look at all of them, see if they're actually an issue in Dead by Daylight. Is there something that they can do to fix it? Or is it just something we're going to have to get over? Kings and queens, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. The second channel is rebooted. Every single week to celebrate, we're going to be giving away one DLC code. All you need to do to enter is just leave a comment on this video and you're set to go. I'd love to hear your thoughts on your opinions, and let's jump on into it. So pretty much there is an uninstall survey for Dead by Daylight, which is a good step in the right direction, getting information on how to actively make their game better. And the question is, which of the following best describes why you are uninstalling Dead by Daylight? Select all that apply. There's a lot of different things on this list. I'm going to go through all of them, spend a good amount of time on a few, spend a little bit on a few, and just talk about what can be fixed, my thoughts on all of them, and if it really is an issue, things like that. So with that being said, let's jump on into the first one. First on the list is lack of transparency from the devs. And this is definitely a big one. I think Dead by Daylight have actively tried to be more transparent and tell us more things about what's going on. And sometimes it's backfire, sometimes it's worked well. But as I said on my main channel, in case you haven't heard, to reiterate the point that I've constantly made, is that I personally feel that the entire team are not in unison and they are not on the same page when it comes down to the things that they are saying. For example, we've seen the FOMO where one team like marketing decides to do these items for Auric cells if you purchase them limited time. But the social teams on Twitter are saying that they don't want to include Prestige 100 rewards because it will induce FOMO. And those are the kind of things that I feel really hits on that transparency factor. It feels like they're lying, essentially. And they're not liars. I don't want to pretty much label them as liars, but if one team says the other thing and the other team says another thing, it doesn't necessarily look good. And I think that's where their essentially comes from. On top of that, they have actively tried, I will give them credit, of putting out like weekly roadmaps of telling us what's happening, so we're always kind of in the loop. But with certain changes as well, for example, like these twins changes that took years and years to work, honestly, I feel that some great community feedback would have helped them and aided them, pushing them in the right direction. It feels that a lot of the changes that they currently do are just based on stats. And I've asked this questions for clarification many times that, are changes just based on stats because they feel that way? And they said no, obviously. But I think majority of it, especially with newer folks coming into the company, it's just a lot of statistic changes that they're like, oh, this is something that's not really good. Let's just buff it up, nerf it, whatever the case may be. And those kind of things really feel like there's a lack of transparency when it comes down to everything. It is something they can work on. It is something I have to give them credit for actively working on, but there's always room for improvement. Next is too much griefing and trolling. This one is, it's just honestly the community of Dead by Daylight. I mean, this isn't necessarily, in my opinion, something the devs could necessarily do to actively fix. Every game has trolls. Every game, there's going to be someone that screws around and messes with you. So I don't necessarily think this is a Dead by Daylight like behaviors issue, but more so just a community. This is kind of the community we have built. That toxic mentality, that us versus them. This is what the community thrives on, and it doesn't stop because there's a new cycle of new players coming in every time. And someone that's been in the game for a long time, like myself, I don't necessarily care about it too much. Back in the days when I was ultra competitive and I was really playing to make sure that I'm winning and I'm doing good, like this really did bother me, but it doesn't anymore. So for this one, to me, it's kind of like pointless. Every game you're going to get to that point where you get annoyed with people. Next is the matchmaking pairing is inaccurate. This one is interesting. I think MMR has definitely made your matchmaking more accurate. You are finding games with people which are adequate skill level, but it just makes every game feel so much more repetitive. So I don't necessarily think that the matchmaking is inaccurate. I just think that it has other issues, making a lot of your games feel way too repetitive. Next on the list is excessive tunneling and camping. They've definitely done some good things to counteract a lot of these. They've buffed DS. They have given you a unhook meter where you could pull yourself off of the hook. So they've taken the steps in the right direction. So I think they've actively done a pretty decent job at all of this in making sure that these things don't necessarily happen. There's, again, always room for improvement when it comes down to it, but I think compared to what it was before, it's much better. Obviously, tunneling is something that still actively happens in the game. There's more changes that they can do, and that's a whole different discussion for another time, but I think this isn't so much of a big issue as it was before. Next is the in-game communication is too limited. I'm indifferent about this one. I feel like for solo queue, you can definitely add like little speech bubbles that you can just kind of pop up. I think Scott Young made a video on this, basically saying that if you could just click quickly, tell people what you're doing, it's really good. I think Dead by Daylight Mobile also has this feature. That'll be great. It'll help solo queue. Communication is key in Dead by Daylight. Swifts basically have that, so a change like this doesn't hurt anybody. It's actually a good change that they can essentially do, and hopefully they decide to do it at some point in time. Next on the list is my friends don't play this game anymore. Fair enough. I mean, if your friends are not playing, it's one of these issues, or maybe they weren't fully into Dead by Daylight to begin with, but that's completely understandable if you don't want to play DBD because your friends aren't playing. Player communication in-game is unfriendly. This is a big one. I think that, especially with anonymous mode, that's mainly where I see a lot of these things happening because you can't get reported. This is where all of the hatred kind of spews from. I think it'll be very, very easy to just make it so that if you're in anonymous mode, you can't say anything, pretty much. Or if you want to go to the extent, just get rid of the entire endgame chat. I don't know if this is something that they want to do, but I rarely ever see anything good coming out of endgame chat. I have made a few friends from endgame chat, but that was way back when. So yeah, I don't think endgame chat is a good thing. Sometimes you get a good game, you want to congratulate the killer, or you want to congratulate your teammates, or whatever the case may be, but I think there's more harm that is done with the communication. Obviously, there are settings to just completely disable this, but, you know, if it's there, people are still going to use it, and these kind of things happen very often. I think if it was just completely gone, especially the anonymous mode part, it would be a lot better. Next on the list, it says the game does not feel like a horror game anymore. Dead by Daylight is still at its core a horror game. It's more of like a glorified running simulator though, but you still have horror iconic characters. You still have that sense of you're going to die, blood, gore, and I think it still is classified as a horror game, but if you're looking for like a phasmophobia type feel, you're not going to get like scared, for example. I guess, you know what, let's look up the definition of a horror game. What is a horror game? And let's see if it fits what it says. It says a horror game is a video game genre centralized on horror fiction and typically designed to scare the player. The term may be used to describe a tabletop game with horror fiction elements. Okay, so I guess to an extent it does feel that way. Resident Evil, for example, is still considered a horror game. You know what I mean? So Outlast is a horror game. I think Dead by Daylight is pretty much on par when it comes down to that. Like, you're not necessarily scared or terrified in Resident Evil. You can get jump scared, things like that. And I think that's the same way in Dead by Daylight. Especially if you're more new, you can get that anxiety feeling when you hear the heartbeat, or you can get jump scared by a ghost face turning the corner or a Myers. It's not to the extent of like a Phasmophobia or Demonologist, but it's still up there, so I think that one is fine. Next on the list is the graphics are unappealing. If you came over from my main channel, we just talked about the Unreal Engine 5 update. When that update is fully integrated into Dead by Daylight and they start improving on the maps, it's going to look really, really good. So I think, again, this is some growing pains. If you're not happy with the graphics, then in due time, it will be good. Too many cheaters is the next thing that they focus on, and every game has cheaters. I'll start off by saying that. In Dead by Daylight, I believe last year, it got to an excessive point. I think they got some new security, they got some new teams working on everything, but no matter what, people are going to find ways to go around everything. They're going to be able to crack the code and figure out the new cheat. And the more Dead by Daylight spend, like maybe every patch, trying to work on this, the better it'll be. I don't know how it actively works right now, if they just do this in waves every single patch, if they just leave it and when someone figures it out, then they fix it. There are a lot of cheaters in Dead by Daylight. I see them on TikTok all the time, just going in, playing, having all the things, popping all the gens, doing whatever they want, and it is really boring. It's, you know, especially the subtle cheaters. So too many cheaters is definitely an issue that I can see people uninstalling the game, and Dead by Daylight just needs to pretty much tighten things up every single time. Like, there's a new wave, fix it, whatever the case may be. Next on the list is matchmaking times take too long. Honestly, I've never really had that. Matchmaking has been pretty damn good. This used to be a problem back in the days, but honestly, matchmaking isn't too bad. The only time matchmaking can be bad is if you're playing at an obscure time with a friend group of maybe 4 people and someone's really good, maybe someone's not that good, and then finding that killer, especially if you're in a remote location, is much more difficult. But overall, I think it's much better than what it was. Next on the list is the gameplay is too repetitive. 100%, the gameplay is so much more repetitive. They're obviously trying to solve this with modifiers and constantly tossing it in, and I think that's a step that by Daylight they're going into. They want to have that feeling of a casual versus competitive mode, where competitive is just core regular DBD and modifiers will always just be something that are in there. If they can get it that there's always a modifier actively going on with more blood points, I think that'll be pretty damn good. We've had our times where there's like downtime, uptime, downtime, uptime. So far, we've seen 2 modifiers in the game, and My Little Oni was just a few days. It was okay. And the first modifier, Lights Out, was okay as well. I'm still waiting for that really, really good modifier. But yeah, I think the gameplay being too repetitive is something that they're working on with the modifiers. Will it be a permanent fix? I guess we wait and see. Killer powers and add-ons are too unbalanced. I think that there's a lot of perks and add-ons that definitely can use some tweaking and some overhauls, especially the ones that really stand out. But overall, the general pool, I think it's fine. And the same can be said for the survivor side as well. There are a few things that need some tweaks desperately, but this is something that people will be upset with no matter what, and based on your experience in Dead by Daylight, you and I will have differing opinions on what is unbalanced. If we're truly talking about unbalanced and we're being unbiased, I don't think there's a lot of things in the game that are like, oh, GG's, we have lost. There are definitely situations like that on the killer side when it comes down to these add-ons, more so than perks, but yeah, that's overall pretty much it. Next, they have the progression feels tedious. I gotta say, it is much better with the new blood web coming out of just clicking a button, leveling up. But after playing for a very long time, eventually you will feel it being very, very tedious. 100%. I feel like Dead by Daylight has kind of gotten away with the fact that a long time ago they introduced the blood web. And I feel like they had much bigger plans for the blood web, maybe actually integrated perks or characters or whatever the case may be, and it just never flourished. It never came to be, and we pretty much just got the blood web, and it works, so why change it? You know what I mean? When you've played for a very long time, you realize that the blood web pretty much means nothing. They've introduced Prestige 100 rewards. They keep on amplifying that blood web. Honestly, I feel like if they want to continue to amplify it, they can introduce Prestige rewards and people will absolutely love it. Things like that to basically polish things up. But I feel like the initial idea that they had in mind, it wasn't the blood web. Like, they wanted to make so much more changes to the blood web, maybe have dedicated perks to people, whatever the case may be, and it just ended up working. So why change it? Just improve it. And they have with the auto level up, it's been better, but there's a lot more room for improvement that they can do. One of my suggestions, give us some Prestige 100 rewards, give us a button that just automatically spends all of our blood points, things like that. I think it'll be quite nice. That can be a whole video in itself. Next on the list, survivor perks are too unbalanced. Pretty much the same thing that we talked about the killer. I think it's much more balanced than what it was. Whenever there's a perk that pops up, it will always be in a rotation of discussion. I think it's just fine as it is. Perks are locked behind characters. Perks are locked behind characters. This is a big one. A lot of the community don't have all of the DLCs, and obviously with the licensed characters, this is gonna suck because you might never get those DLCs. It's an interesting one. Dead by Daylight have definitely marketed it well to use the new perks, and then obviously there's big complaints when those perks get nerfs, especially after you spend your money for that perk specifically, if you're going for that perk itself. So this is a tricky one. I know Mintskull has pointed out how much money you'd have to spend or how much time you'd have to spend grinding all these things, and I definitely think that there can be some good solutions to this. That topic is definitely a big one, and we can talk about it in a whole different video, but definitely I can see that being an issue. If you really want a good perk, you might be stuck with the standard pool. When I do my challenges going from Ash to Eerie and I don't have all of the characters, it's very difficult to have regular gameplay or have the perk that really works with your character. And then if you're playing a different character at some point in time, you have to get a whole different perk from somebody else. It would be cool if there was a system where you can earn a separate currency to pretty much unlock any perk that you specifically want. Maybe that can definitely reduce the grind. It doesn't have to be to the point where Dead by Daylight are completely sacrificing all of their income and people don't buy the DLCs whatsoever. But it would be a nice feature for the people that, you know, there are people out there that don't spend any money in the game. And I think that can help out quite a lot. We obviously have the Shrine of Secrets. I think it's very outdated. I think it can be, you know, completely fixed. Even if they want to go to the extent, let's just say you earn this currency for every devotion level you get, and every devotion level you get, you can unlock 2 perks, 1 survivor, 1 killer, and you can click on that character and just take whatever perk you want. Or you can make it so that if you click on the character, maybe it's a random generator and you get a random perk out of the 3 that you pick from a specific character. Whatever the case may be, some extra thing would be nice. Maybe they don't want to introduce another currency because it could be really hectic, whatever the case may be. But yeah, definitely something that they can improve on. Next on the list is a different game was released. Fair enough. If there's a new game and you're playing a new game, you have done the most sane thing to do, to have variety. A lot of Dead by players, they don't do this. They don't play other games. I play Dead by Daylight. One of the reasons I don't get burnt out, I still do get burnt out, don't get me wrong, but not as often as I see a lot of my content creator friends. I don't play Dead by Daylight off stream. I only do it when I'm recording or when I'm streaming. And even when I'm recording, it doesn't even feel like I'm playing because I'm just probably jumping in with bots or maybe 1 or 2 quick matches to get some gameplay. And I don't get burned out about it. I don't consume overbearing amounts of content of it. I play different games. I've tried out Enshrouded. Recently, I tried the new Valheim update. Today, I'm going to try the Fallout update. And this is one of the reasons why I can play Dead by Daylight for such a long time. It isn't like my main focus, my main game that I'm constantly playing. This entire week, I haven't really even touched Dead by Daylight. So 100%, I can understand if someone uninstalls just because a new game was there. Maybe you have too less storage space. Next on the list is too many bugs. Yes, bugs will always be there. If you're getting a bug naturally, you want to uninstall, that's fine. Luckily, a lot of these bugs are fixed in hot patches, but with the Unreal Engine bug, for example, I can definitely see people being so frustrated that they uninstall. So bugs, I feel like it will just always be there no matter what. It's not necessarily something they can fix rapidly. Maybe they can do more testing, but even with excessive amounts of testing, there will still be bugs. Lack of cross progression is a big one. I think Dead by Daylight really wants to get this out there. And I think they're just going to jump the gun and say, listen, you can have everything except the license stuff, and that's just how it's going to be. And that's going to be their solution to it. I think that's going to happen at some point in time. This isn't behavior's fault. This is more so on Sony and Xbox, specifically from what I heard Sony, but I don't work there, so I don't know. But cross progression is something that likely will never happen unless Dead by Daylight does it a certain way. Next on the list is clearing storage space, similar to just uninstalling the game because of a new game being installed. I can completely get it. And none of the above. If it wasn't any of these options, then who knows what it could be. But that is Dead by Daylight's uninstall survey. It seems like a good self-evaluation though, because they know this is going to be realistically one of the reasons why you're uninstalling. If they're aware of all of these issues that are currently in the game, they can use the feedback of people uninstalling to actively fix things, because I'm sure something here is going to be clicked off more than something else. Like, for example, gameplay being too repetitive might be ticked off way more than clearing storage space. So they're already working on a few of these things. For example, the clearing storage space, they've made it so that it's like 30 gigs less on console. Huge step in the right direction, and that's thanks to the Unreal Engine. They're actively trying to balance things with tunneling, camping. Maybe with Unreal Engine, we'll see better graphics, cheaters, maybe they get new teams. So they're self-evaluating themselves, and they've done a good job at identifying the main culprits of why people are unhappy and dissatisfied with the game, and now it is time to see them take action. There you go. That is Dead by Daylight's uninstall survey. A quick video, or maybe not so quick, but a first video for the second channel in a very, very long time. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, make sure you leave a like down below. I'm going to aim to have discussion videos every other day because there's a lot of things to talk about, whether that's just watching old school content or reacting to some trending stuff, whatever the case may be. This is kind of more of like an account where I can just talk and do anything without having to worry, is that video doing good? Should I, keep honest? I'm just tossing everything here. So thank you guys so much. Make sure you guys are subscribing so you can enter that giveaway and all that good stuff. And as always, I'm the King. I tip my crown to you guys, and we'll see you in the fog. Take care.